don't feel like it's any hidden knowledge that when Resident Evil 4 released in 2004, it was not only considered like the best Resident Evil game, but probably one of the best games to release even at the time. A sentiment that is still held by many today. I too love Resident Evil 4, and while it was also the precursor to the more action horror focus that we would get in the series in subsequent games that I've railed against, it's hard to argue that this game wasn't great from mechanics to story, with all the zaniness in between. Despite my gripes with the escort mission style gameplay revolving around Ashley, I still played through Resident Evil 4 twice while doing the video on it. See the link to that up above if you haven't seen it already. So when the remake was announced, and there was a lot of speculation regarding if it would maintain that pedigree of renown, given how the 3 remake went, and would it be faithful to what came before, while bringing it now to PS5, Xbox Series consoles, and PC. Well, that's what this video is about, Resident Evil 4 Remake, and if it holds up to the Game of the Year contender that came before. As of recording this, this will be the last video in the Resident Evil series for a while, at least until a new one comes out, or I get a bug on my ass to go and play more of the side games. So let's go out with a bang and cover the remake of the most beloved game in the series by many. If you enjoy this type of retrospective and review content, be sure to hit that subscribe button for more stuff like it, and go ahead and check out the other like 12 or 13 videos we've done in the Resident Evil series thus far. And if you really want to, you can go further back and check out all the old videos we did on series like Wolfenstein, Sniper Elite 5, and Dead Rising. Don't forget to like if you enjoyed this video, and without further delay, let's get right into it. From the very onset of the remake, if you have played the original before, you can already tell things are going to be vastly different, far more serious and dark. We get a cutscene focusing on Leon's perspective, recounting the events of the Resident Evil 2 remake and how it actually affected him going forward, joining a secret government organization, getting trained as special forces, and even for the keen observer, see his connection to Krauser. More on him soon. I like this change from the original, which just set up what Umbrella did prior, and the larger themes of Resident Evil 2 don't focus really on Leon and his story specifically, and with him being the main protagonist of the game just felt a little weird at the time. Leon is also positioned vastly differently that of the original as well, this time being far less goofy and quirky with one-liners and badass attitudes, but here in the remake he's more hardened from the events that happened before, and while he maintains some of his old quips like the bingo scene after the village encounter, he's far more serious here in the remake. While I do miss the old Leon on occasion, as he was genuinely funny to me then and now in the original, I much prefer the tone of this new one, as it fits far better given the events of Resident Evil 2 Remake and the situation at hand. And with the power of modern machines, his abilities and Spec Ops training are far more showcased as well, performing far more CQB and agility in the remake than we had even in the original. He's also a much deeper character here, and while I don't necessarily want to have to psychoanalyze my protagonist in Resident Evil games, it's nice to have a character with more nuanced motivations and backstory. Leon isn't the only character who had a major overhaul as well, with almost everyone getting more screen time and getting far more developed. By far the best of these was Luis, the Spanish scientist we meet in the original tied up under the house, and in the original I found him woefully underutilized, only popping up about 4 to 5 times before he meets his untimely demise. In the remake, while not only being far better acted and rendered, he also sees a ton more screen time as well, which allows Luis to become more fleshed out throughout the story of Resident Evil 4. We learn through actual dialogue that he used to work as a bio researcher for Umbrella, and after their collapse began to help with the Los Illuminados in their research of the Los Plagas virus that was found on the island. In doing so, we learn that he is essentially to blame for aiding the entire infection of the island, but having a change of heart begins to work with Leon and Ada in order to help cure Leon and Ashley of the Plagas, and getting a sample for Ada and the mysterious benefactor she works for. I love Luis in this remake, and while he still sees his death, it is in fact much later in the game, this time giving the player the ability to learn more about him and his research, something that we only really got in text files in the original. Speaking of Ada, she may be the only character who's probably worse in this remake than she was in the original. Still playing the same role, she mysteriously appears from time to time to aid Leon by asking vague questions and subsequently dipping out of the scene. With the voice acting being absolutely terribly directed, she also sounds painfully bored to even be in the scene in the first place, and while I don't blame the voice actor for this, it is extremely fair to blame the voice director on the performance here, as it's pretty pitiful if I'm being honest. I never really liked Ada as a character either, and that continues on here in the remake as well. And also, let's not forget up until this point, Leon thinks Ada is dead, as mentioned in the beginning cutscene, so it comes off as bizarre that there isn't more fanfare when he discovers that the woman he loves is in fact alive. It's just bizarre that in a world where you watch a girl you fell for in Raccoon City supposedly fall to their death, that you wouldn't have a little bit more enthusiasm when finding out that she might be alive, even though she did try to betray you. And I understand that sense of betrayal, but come on, it just doesn't add up here. The last main character we need to speak of is Ashley, the girl Leon is here to save. We'll get more into her mechanics as a escort mission character and her level that she has to herself a bit later in the video, but in the remake, she is by far one of my favorite characters. Much like the original Ashley, she plays the trope of the damsel in distress, hence why Leon is here to begin with. And in the original, she played this role to a fault, essentially being useless nearly the entire game, short of being captured and yelling for Leon over and over again. Here in the remake, however, she does begin that way, covering her ears when the guns start blasting and the action gets going. However, throughout the game, we see her attempt to try to help Leon in whatever way she can, even if it's just a simple check-in asking if he's okay after a long drawn-out fight. She also helps assist in tangible ways as well, like in the castle where she tosses the blue fire to stun the infected armors, making it easier for Leon to dispose of these monsters and move on. Let's look a little bit forward into the game as well at the house defense sequence. In the original, Leon tells Ashley to go upstairs and hides, only to emerge once the fighting is done and Luis and Leon are just shooting the shit. In the remake, during the action, she bursts in through the back door, telling the boys to follow her to safety, actively taking ownership and making sure that these two make it out alive. Also later in the castle, during her section of gameplay, she's not only working to get back to Leon, but summoning all of her courage to save Leon, who's actually trapped in a cage. You can see the growth in Ashley as a character, and as the dynamic between herself and Leon grows, you can see the relationship blossom as well. And not in that way, you fucking pervs. As the two are making their way through the ruined bunker area towards the end of the game, she takes the reins of a crane in order to knock the wall down. Not because she has to, but because she wants to help in that partnership between her and Leon and what they've built. I mean, hell, she even mentions this on the elevator sequence, saying that they might make a good team together one day and she's going to become a secret agent. And you can see Leon also grow to equally care for her as well. And I personally love to see the growth of these two characters' relationship. It's really touching to see. Ashley's redesign also reflects her actual age. In the original, she looked a bit more like 15 or 16, whereas she was supposed to be a college-age student. Here she does look aged up a bit, making that scene at the very end of the game way less creepy, as it looks like a 20-something hitting on Leon as opposed to a teenager hitting on Leon, asking if he would work overtime. Just in the characters alone, you can see how every one of our heroes have changed when moving up from 2004 version to the 2023 version of this game. And minus Ada, I would say that all of them have worked far better than their original counterparts in my opinion. Keep in mind that these opinions are always subjective, so let me know in the comments down below what you guys think about the character changes here in the remake. But a lot more was done to this game than just character work, so let's get deeper into the world, mechanics, and story of Resident Evil 4 Remake.
Ashley. Ashley Graham, are you in here?
Looking at the remakes that we've loved, that being Resident Evils 1 and 2, the main thread that flows between those two is the lack of overall changes to the level and world design. Some areas were added, others were retextured, but by and large, they remained close to how they were in the originals. And the same can be said for what was done here in Resident Evil 4. While puzzles and ways to progress have changed as well as adding a metric fuck ton of new treasures, the main core and theme of each area that you go to is largely the same. The first house we go in is almost a perfect allegory for how the rest of the game is treated. In the original, we turn a couple corners and run into the house, where we meet the Ganado stoking the fire and attacking Leon. We have the same thing here, but the house layout has been greatly expanded, adding rooms to the side, a basement where we find the dead police officer's body, and an upstairs with a couple of additions as well. However, the main hallway, the kitchen room, and the upstairs where Leon jumps out of the window are all still here, keeping the ties to the original there while also giving some more additions to the world and play space at the same time, keeping it similar but adding. Unlike what was done in 3 Remake, where it felt like most of the original play space and areas of Raccoon City were completely stripped out. The core areas are all here as well, untouched and still the same way that we remember them back in the day. Like the village encounter, which was still just as tense as the original, which kudos to Capcom for somehow managing to hit that watermark. The church where Ashley is kept, the water room in the castle, which plays virtually the same and terrible as before, as well as the section where the helicopter comes in to the military base to blow up all the Ganado. You know, the part that I don't like as well. Where a lot was added was in the pathing on getting to these core areas. This blending of old and new helps make this game feel familiar and yet new at the same time for returning fans. Much of what was done in Resident Evil 2 Remake, albeit to a much larger scale. These new areas or scenes also fit with the original remade areas as well. That for me when playing made me try to recall whether these areas were actually in the original or not, which is a good sign that these new play spaces were made right, as it's able to blend the old with the new seamlessly. When thinking of Resident Evil 4 as well, I also think of the boss fights littered throughout, and Resident Evil 4 had some pretty awesome boss fights. best, and I think the most out of all the Resident Evil franchise. In regards to their quality, I don't think there was a bad one in the bunch. The El Gigante fight is still a spectacle, mostly because of the dog coming into the fray, silhouetted by that crack of lightning, making it just fucking epic. The fight with Mendez is so cinematic and visually interesting, it makes you forget that you're shooting this guy just in the back. My favorite fight has to be Krauser, who I'm glad to see get a little bit more screen time to flesh out why he was even here in the first place, making him fit a little bit better than before, as he's the one who captured Ashley to get revenge on the United States for leaving him and his men stranded, leading to their deaths. You also get more of a relationship between Leon and Krauser in the remake as well, as the original just feels like he shows up randomly, and he still kind of does, but the players give him more stakes as well, as Krauser is the one to kill Luis, unlike the original where he is killed by Sadler. This murder of a actually pretty awesome character really got me wanting to just beat Krauser's head into a pulp, which I think makes it really accomplish the goal Capcom was going for and making you want to just destroy this guy. With the revamped knife mechanics, this fight is way more interesting and acts more like a set piece fight, testing your abilities to parry and dodge rather than just being a QTE nightmare as it was before. And while he struggles to fit in as well as the other antagonists, I'm glad to see Krauser get a bit more love here. The fight with Salazar and Sadler, as well as the Verdungo assassin, all play about the same as it was in the original, albeit on a much more epic scale, making these fights that much better. Also, did I mention that I actually like Salazar way better this time than the original as well? Far more menacing and less of a creepy looking kid vibe like he was Slappy out of Goosebumps. His inclusion also fits a lot better here than it did in the original, as he's acting as more of the mouthpiece for Sadler's teachings and also is there to help speed up the infection within Ashley, rather than just playing a long game of cat and mouse and keep away with her. I love his design here and appreciate his inclusion much more this time around, which was an added treat for someone who didn't understand Salazar's inclusion much in the original. The world building of the remake is far more deep and does a great job at telling the player how it's all interconnected, as opposed to the original where a lot of this backstory and world building was told through text logs. For story beats as to why a character or villain is present serves much better to be told to the player via some sort of dialogue or cutscene, rather than leaving that bit of information to be gleaned through text notes or missable collectibles. There are games that this isn't the case, say in something like Dark Souls. However, in my opinion, that game serves more as the exception and not the rule. Overall, here in this remake, it felt great to come back to this Spanish island again. Once again, mowing through the Ganado villagers, the cultists in the castle, and the weird military gray dudes in the bunker, with everything feeling more interconnected than it was before, and every antagonist and bad guy being more fleshed out. It made it all more cohesive for me, which caused me to like it even more. Which brings us into the story changes of Resident Evil 4 Remake, so let's move on.
Utterly uncivilized! Mongrel!
Speaking of story, while the main beat-to-beat notes are virtually the same, there are a ton of finer details added to the experience to help further contextualize aspects of the story. A lot of these additions focus on something that I feel was far less focused on in the original, that being the actual infection taking place between both Ashley and Leon. While there was some time for it in the original, like Leon choking Ada with creepy red eyes, RE4 Remake goes out of its way almost every chapter to remind the player of the infection taking hold, from Ashley coughing up blood soon after rescuing her, to Sadler taking control of Ashley to stab Leon later in the castle. The game does a great job at threading in the underlying threat that they can't control. And even more so, we can see the effects this infection has on Leon and Ashley's relationship, specifically on Ashley. After stabbing Leon, she runs off in shame, and upon finding her later, before going into the castle courtyard, you can see the fear Ashley has in being even close to Leon, for fear that she will actually hurt him again. Not only can you see the bond begin to solidify here between these two characters, but both are acutely aware of how the infection is actually affecting them, making the need to get the parasite out that much more imperative. As skin changes color, eyes become bloodshot, and the two fall more and more into Sadler's control, the stakes begin to build up higher and higher, all culminating with the walk to Luis's lab, where Leon begins to actually hallucinate, the parasite finally taking hold, and giving Sadler almost full control. Speaking of Sadler, we've gone this far without actually bringing him up too much, which is crazy because this new rendition of the main antagonist of Resident Evil 4 is far more sinister and plays better as a villain here, much more so than he did in the original. I was always confused as to why Sadler basically spilled his entire plan in the church scene before rescuing Ashley, much like a Bond villain does in the old James Bond flicks back in the day. He also just shows up randomly to kill Luis in the castle, feeling bizarre as well. Like his main goal was just to follow Leon around to block his path, despite him being a cult leader and supposedly in control of Los Plagas. In the remake, we don't see him much in person up until the very end of the game at all, despite some glimpses here and there of him in your mind trying to take control, and naturally the iconic paintings littering the houses of the village and Mendez's homestead. He's also far more menacing than before, speaking more in religious zealotry while flanked by his priest wrapped in plastic bags or whoever these guys are. The remake's attempt to make Sadler mysterious I think worked well for this antagonist as well, making him feel much larger than life than he did in the original. Couple all this as well as the changes to characters like Ashley and Leon, as well as fleshing out Krauser and Salazar really helped this game in the long run. As I said before, all of the core beats are really still here, but the amount of expansion on lore and character depth that makes this remake able to capture the original well while keeping it fresh, much like the first two remakes accomplished. Even with the amount of additions made here to the story, as a personal fan of the original, felt that it was pretty near and true, but you guys are more than welcome to correct me if I'm wrong once again in the comments below.
Over here, stranger.
Who's that?
When discussing Resident Evil 4, it would be naturally weird if we didn't include the Shopkeeper at all in this video, and I'm here to say that not only is he as awesome as he was in the original, he comes sporting some new and souped up features not seen in the original. As stated before, the treasure mechanic is still here, that being find treasures and gems, allowing you to slot these gems into said treasures to increase their sale value and allowing you to buy or upgrade more stuff. The gem system here has been far more fleshed out now, receiving bonuses for color matching, having all different colors, and so on. Essentially creating patterns or matching colors makes the sale price of the treasure worth way more, making you actually think about what color gems you're putting in what order to maximize your potential value of said treasure. A nice addition for sure. The shooting gallery also got a large overhaul as well. As you explore the world or get high scores at the shooting gallery, you can earn silver or gold coins that you can spend in the slot machine in order to basically pull trinkets out to attach to your inventory case. These charms active passive bonuses to Leon with a ton of different abilities like finding more ammo, crafting more, bonus ammunition per craft, or items being worth more when selling them to the shopkeep. While I've never been a fan of the shooting galleries in almost any game, it was nice to see some rewards to incentivize people to go in and actually try to earn some of these charms. I personally just ran with what I had, which was the green herb find and the handgun ammo find, but if you're willing to put in the time, you can definitely earn some cool stuff in here. So I have to say that this was probably a great addition as well. However, the biggest thing we need to discuss, and one that I can see being a bit controversial, was the addition of side quests to Resident Evil 4. While exploring, you will find blue papers hanging on the walls, telling Leon to do certain tasks like shooting the blue medallions, killing a number of rats, or selling a specific item like a golden egg. These tasks can be done for spindles, which in turn act as a currency to earn more special items. Turning in these spindles gains you items like stocks for the TMP or the Red 7 pistol, more gems for you to slot in more treasures, or most notably, item upgrade tickets, essentially allowing the player to bypass all the weapon upgrades to get the special perk in exchange for one of these tickets. While I don't mind the introduction of side quests per se, I do have an issue with how boring they are to do, as most of these are just search for said thing and shoot it. The rats are probably the biggest pain in the ass to me, as I have had many issues with these rats even spawning, thus not even being able to finish the task at hand. However, I do enjoy the concept of earning a currency to trade for more or better stuff, and while I don't mind this mechanic on its face, I just wish that the quests to get them were a bit more interesting and less mindless busy work. We also need to discuss the elephant in the room, that being the microtransactions, as this is something that caught basically everybody off guard, especially me. Now, I really haven't had to discuss microtransactions in any of my videos thus far, as it basically has just never come up yet. But for the record, I'm not the biggest fan of any sort of game-changing microtransactions. Cosmetics are whatever, and I'll engage in them if they're really cool or if I feel like that I've put more time into the game than I've actually paid for, mostly in like free-to-play games. But that's about as far as I'll go. Now, this is a touchy subject, but what I do care about is the addition of these transactions to a $70 product 2 weeks after the release of the game. And that is my main issue here with Resident Evil 4. If it was just cosmetics, that would be fine, but it's not. As 2 weeks after launch, Capcom released the weapon upgrade ticket packs, which is just scummy in my opinion. Now, I know that it's a single player game and I'm a huge proponent of do and buy what you want, but it's the inclusion of these new purchases 2 weeks after the game's launch, ensuring that it got all the good press it was going to get before going and essentially selling upgrade skips, is what I find really scummy beyond belief. I'm not a fan, never will be a fan, and this practice needs to stop now. We saw what happened with Ubisoft and how out of hand that got with experience skips, level skips, item skips, and I do not want to see that here in Resident Evil at all. And while the other systems were good, this was a major detractor for me personally.
Over here!
For me though, the biggest changes come in the form of gameplay, and these changes stand out to me as being some of the best revisions to the original formula. I critique the original as being the progenitor of the action into the survival horror genre, and this remake does very little to dissuade that. And in fact, I feel like it's even more action-packed than the original was to begin with. However, that doesn't stop this game from being just a blast to play like the original was. While herb mixing and ammo crafting make their return, the largest change of the formula would be the stealth aspects of this game. In the remake of Resident Evil 4, Leon can crouch walk, allowing him to sneak upon enemies to basically one-hit knife them, thinning the herd before the upcoming fight. This ability to sneak attack with your knife brought a lot of tension back to this game, as ammo does feel a little bit scarcer here than even in the original, especially when you're playing on hardcore. And given the amount of additional combat encounters there are in this game, the stealth felt pretty critical to being able to win a lot of these fights. These stealth mechanics are further fleshed out when it comes to Ashley's section as well, taking this area into more of the horror genre we know today, her being defenseless and needing to sneak around in order to get to the next objective. However, this scene has maybe some of the best chase sequences as well, and pacing than any other game I've played recently. This game is masterful at giving the character control of the chase, but timing the armor statues to always be on your heels, winding the twists and turns of the library in order to make it much more tense and interactive. I have to say, going through it again for this video, that Ashley sequence is masterfully done, and I really wish that we would maybe get a DLC or some more of that into this game. With it being tense, scary, and just well paced, it was a masterful section and a fantastic break to the formula we had been playing thus far. The other main change that was done in the remake was how knives actually work. Leon can parry almost everything now with his knife, including the chainsaw guy, and with a successful parry is able to stun the enemy for a brief period of time, giving more window to either blast him away or stagger further to allow for this game's melee mechanics to kick in and knocking these guys flat on their ass. From moving, sneaking, shooting, and parrying, this game has a flow state I haven't felt in a long time in any Resident Evil game, and honestly is maybe one of the best feeling games to play, even with the new remakes included. The amount of options a player has to deal with a scenario has been increased a lot, and yet all these mechanics blend so well together and work to keep the tension as the villagers or cultists swarm the piss out of you. With the inclusion of the boar's head enemies, more chainsaw guys, the variety of plague creatures, each combat encounter feels fresh and fun to engage with. And while I always will prefer the old school survival horror aspects of gameplay, I can't deny that this game was just a great time to play. My only major gripe was the Ashley mechanics, as while she's following you throughout the island, it becomes a little bit painful. As Leon, you have two options of what to do with her, telling her to either stay close or telling her to stay further back. Honestly, it felt like neither option was all that great, as it didn't seem to matter what I did. She would either go ahead and get herself captured or just get knocked out, or both. Either way, forcing me to tear away from the fight at hand in order to save her, and pray to God I don't shoot her in the face with a rifle and cause a game over. There are some lockers located throughout the game as well that you can tell her to hide in, but these also seem to appear a lot when Ashley wasn't even in the picture, so they never got used all that much as she was never there. Gameplay wise, this was probably my biggest miss in this remake, and as I wish there were more options of what to do with her, or just include none at all, just keep her tight on your ass the entire time. Bow chicka bow wow. But even with that odd direction of change, I still had a lot of fun just playing through this game. But this video has gone on for a while, so let's bring this bad boy to a close.
We're changing course now.
Overall, I really do think Resident Evil 4 Remake is an awesome recreation of the original, which was a tough sell as it was heralded as one of the best games of all time, and especially at the time it came out. And it still reigns in many folks' top Resident Evil games. From gameplay, story, and character changes, I overall think that they were all for the better, leading to a fantastic reprisal of Resident Evil 4. And while some areas still kind of suck, like the water room and the castle, it's easy to overlook when everything else feels just way better to play. Opinions will always vary, and as I mentioned consistently both in these videos as well as the comments, it's cool to not like certain games or aspects of one, and I just love reading your guys' opinions in the comments below. So let me know what your thoughts are down there, and you can tell me I'm straight up wrong. It's happened a lot, like at Resident Evil 5. But that doesn't mean we can't enjoy a pleasant back and forth and we both listen to each other's sides. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like on it, as it helps get this video out to more folks to actually watch and really helps out the channel. And lastly, if you enjoy content like this, consider subscribing once again to see more stuff like this when it goes out. We're getting so close to that 1K goal that I've set to hit by the end of the year, and it would actually mean the world to me to get to that point. With this video done, it also brings a conclusion to Resident Evil 14 videos later. All along, this is a series that has always been near and dear to me and some of my favorite experiences in gaming, and while there will always be missteps along the way, seeing that this franchise is literally over 20 years old, I hope that these videos will serve to re-spark some of that magic for old fans in playing these games, or convince newcomers to give them a try. Once again, thank you all so much for joining me on the ride, and keep an eye out for the next set of videos that are to come. Thank you all for watching, and as usual, my name is Brendan, and I'll see you guys in the next one.